The Battle of the Thousand Islands was an engagement fought on 16 to 24 August 1760 in the upper St. Lawrence River, among the Thousand Islands, along the present-day Canada-United States border, by British and French forces during the closing phases of the 7 Years' War, as it is called in Canada and Europe, or the French and Indian War as it is referred to in the United States. The engagement took place at Fort Levis, about 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers, downstream from the modern Ogdensburg-Prescott International Bridge, Point Oberyle, present-day Maitland, Ontario, and the surrounding waters and islands. The small French garrison at Fort Levis held the much larger British army at bay for over a week, managing to sink 2 British warships and to cripple a third. Their resistance delayed the British advance to Montreal from the west. By August 1760, the French were building Fort Levis at Isle Royale, present-day Chimney Island, New York, in the St. Lawrence River. Captain Pierre Pouchot was assigned its defense. Pouchot had been taken prisoner after the siege of Fort Niagara, but he was later released in a prisoner exchange. Chevalier de Levis' original design for the fort called for stone walls, 200 guns, and some 2,500 troops. What Pouchot had was a small fort with wooden stockades, 5 cannon, and 200 soldiers. Also under Pouchot's command were the corvettes L'Outaouais and L'Iroquois, crewed by 200 sailors and voyageurs. L'Iroquois, under command of Commodore René Hippolyte Pepin de la Force, was armed with 10 12-pound cannon and swivel guns. L'Outaouais, commanded by Captain Pierre Boucher de la Broquerie, carried 10 12-pounders, 1 18-pound gun and swivel guns. After the fall of Quebec in the 1759 Battle of the Plains of Abraham, British Commander-in-Chief General Geoffrey Amherst prepared to launch a 3-pronged attack to take Montreal. Columns were to advance along the St. Lawrence River from Quebec to the northeast, up the Richelieu River from Lake Champlain to the south, and from Oswego on Lake Ontario to the west. The latter force, which Amherst led personally, numbered some 10,000 men and 100 siege guns. Soon after his arrival to Isle Royale, Pouchot ordered abandonment of the nearby Mission Fort de la Presentation in the shipyard and stockades at Point Oberyle to consolidate his resources at the more defendable Fort Levis. La Force had run his corvette L'Iroquois aground at Point Oberyle on August 1. Although L'Iroquois was raised, it was deemed too damaged to be put into action. It was beached again under the guns at Fort Levis. Amherst's force set out from Oswego on August 10. Captain Joshua Loring, who commanded the British Snows Onondaga and Mohawk, had been sent ahead of Amherst's force as an advance guard. Onondaga had been launched at Fort Niagara as Apollo in 1759. Commanded by Loring, it carried 4 9-pound guns, 14 6-pounders, and a crew of 100 seamen and 25 soldiers. Mohawk, commanded by Lieutenant David Phipps, carried 16 6-pounders and a crew of 90 seamen and 30 soldiers. On August 7, French lookouts sighted Onondaga and Mohawk from their outpost at Isle Auxiliary Chevreulles, upstream from Fort Levis. The French withdrew in a row galley, pursued by Onondaga and Mohawk. The 2 British vessels got lost in the maze of islands, and did not find their way back to the main channel for several days. Amherst's force arrived at Point Oberyle on August 16. Fearing the remaining French ship might attack his transports, Amherst ordered Colonel George Williamson to capture L'Outaouais the following day. At dawn of August 17, Williamson set out in a gig, accompanied by 5 row galleys, one armed with a howitzer, the others each armed with a single 12-pounder. The galleys took shelter fore and aft of L'Outaouais, where they could not be hit by the ship's broadsides. The British galleys fired great shot and round shot at the French ship, crippling L'Outaouais, which drifted helplessly towards the British batteries set up at Point Oberyle. After 3 hours of fighting, L'Outaouais had managed to fire around 72 shots, damaging 2 of the British galleys. La Broquerie was forced to surrender L'Outaouais to Williamson. La Broquerie was wounded in the fighting. 15 members of his crew were killed or wounded. The captured L'Outaouais was repaired and renamed Williamson, to be put back into service by Captain Patrick Sinclair against her former owners. On August 19, Amherst commenced the attack on Fort Levis. La Force and his crew had been ordered back from the beached L'Iroquois to the fort to assist with its defense. Williamson was hit 48 times by the 5 French guns when it joined in with the British batteries firing on Fort Levis from surrounding islands. Mohawk and Onondaga finally arrived at the scene in the evening and Amherst called a ceasefire for the night. The attack resumed at dawn on August 20th with Williamson, Mohawk, and Onondaga all firing on the fort with a combined 50 guns. As the attack progressed, the French guns hit and sank Williamson and Onondaga. Mohawk ran aground under the French cannon, where it sat helpless as it was pounded until out of action. The British batteries on the surrounding islands continued to fire, switching to hot shot, used to start fires within the fort. The siege continued until August 24 when Pouchot ran out of ammunition for his guns and asked for terms. The fighting cost the British 26 killed and 47 wounded, likely excluding militia, to the French losses of around 275 of the original 300 defenders killed or wounded. Pouchot was amongst the wounded. The British could hardly believe that such a small garrison had offered such spirited resistance. After the battle, Amherst's force remained at Fort Levis for another 4 days before continuing toward Montreal. The British advance cost Amherst at least 84 more men drowned in the rapids of the St. Lawrence, although Pouchot puts this number at 336. He went on to meet the forces from Quebec and Lake Champlain and completely surrounded Montreal. The three-pronged British forces totaling 17,000 men began to converge on the town, burning villages along the way and prompting mass desertions from the Canadian militia. On September 8, Montreal was surrendered by New France's governor, the Marquis de Vaudreuil. To avoid further bloodshed, the British renamed Fort Levis Fort William Augustus. They raised the 3 vessels sunk during the battle, Williamson, Onondaga, and Mohawk, and put them back into service to patrol the waters between the fort and Fort Niagara.